I've spent a lot of time critiquing religion and pointing out how some very terrible religious people make life harder for everyone else. So I feel like it's only fair to turn the spotlight on atheists now too. I've interacted with plenty of theists and atheists alike, and let me tell you, neither group has a monopoly on being insufferable. I feel like atheists who deconstruct their beliefs after being part of a religion often bring a unique perspective. They've lived through the disappointment, they've prayed, they've followed the rituals and believed, which usually gives them insight on how faith shapes others and their own lives. Listening to them is like hearing a veteran share war stories full of depth and nuance, and I just feel like they're less likely to reject the entire concept since they're critiquing a system they intimately knew. Whether it's explaining how dogma operates or how religion impacts people emotionally, their insight feels rooted in personal struggle, not just philosophical theory. In contrast, atheists who've never engaged with religion sometimes make very broad, uninformed assumptions. It's usually not malicious, but their critiques often feel very surface level, as if they're just parroting stereotypes. Without that lived experience, it can come off as very hollow. Being raised atheist doesn't necessarily invalidate their critiques, but I have to say, sometimes they can get very annoying. People often assume that I'm atheist just because I critique organized religions a lot, but I'm not. I'm agnostic. And yes, there is a difference. Atheists tend to lean towards nihilism, life begins, life ends, and that's it. Agnostics usually believe in a higher power, so it's not like we say there's no God, it's more like who knows. And most agnostics also ask, who cares? I personally doubt that it's any of the established religions that we currently have. Aliens, God, Allah, Zeus, Odin, Shiva, or sylphs just all sound too earthly to me, because if there were a higher power, I kind of doubt that humans as a whole would be able to comprehend it, let alone come up with the correct name it calls itself. I personally don't like how arrogant people can be when it comes to things that can't be proven, like the before or after life. It's one thing to have strong beliefs or non-beliefs, but when atheists claim that their beliefs are true or that religious people are wasting their time feels so closed-minded. They mock the idea of an afterlife, and whenever people talk about their thoughts that there might be something beyond the grave, their go-to argument is that you're delusional. But how can anyone claim to know for sure? You realize that the way that you proudly exude certainty when it comes to the abstinence of the afterlife mirrors the exact same delusions that you claim that you're better than? They roll their eyes at someone saying, I think there might be a God, but then turn around and make definitive claims like there's absolutely nothing after death, without acknowledging that it's just as speculative. I also hate when this arrogance shuts down conversations. As I've talked about previously, I get a bunch of religious stuff on my feed. A lot of them were very annoying in terms of content, and the comment section reflected that. But even when the people were practicing their religion safely and respectfully, people in the comments still had a problem with it. Like, a teacher praying over her student's desk is not pushing her religion onto students. She's alone in her classroom. I need you guys to learn how to use context clues. It's wild how often atheists show up to tear the content apart, mock people, or just drop some holier-than-thou takes like, I'm smarter because I don't believe in your imaginary friend. It must be so exhausting to be this unfun. Instead of opening up genuine, interesting conversations about mortality or learning something new about others, they just shut down everything because they're schizophrenic and you're not, right? Ironically, it kind of feels like the atheist version of a street preacher yelling, Jesus loves you, when they say shit like, that's not real, right? The intent might be different, but the energy is still the same. Pushing your worldview onto someone without considering whether it's wanted or appropriate. I remember hanging out with a friend who had recently become super invested in tarot cards and everything spiritual. They weren't just like dabbling either. They were fully convinced they had awakened psychic abilities. The whole I've unlocked my third eye and now I see the world differently. Personally, I've never really believed in psychics or the whole mystical side of things, and I actually want to talk about spirituality in general because the community is very patchy, but I'll get into that later. But I've just always thought that tarot cards were super cool. They're beautifully designed and their meanings are just vague enough to feel relevant to anyone, which makes them fun to interpret. It's like an artsy version of a fortune cookie, very profound, very deep, very cutesy. So there we were, sitting cross-legged on our bed while they set up their cards for a reading for me. They were fully in the zone, shuffling the deck while explaining how the energy of the cards was aligning with my frequency of my aura. It was a bit much for my taste, but it was very fun watching someone sharing something they loved. While they were still explaining things to me, one of the family members barged into the room to ask them a quick question. But the moment they saw the tarot cards, they started busting out laughing, started mocking the whole thing, and even messed with the cards, saying, you actually believe in this stuff? It's not even real. I saw my friend's demeanor shift instantly. They went from being very confident and enthusiastic to visibly deflated. Still, they tried to play it off, telling me, oh, it's okay, their energy just interfered with yours, and now the reading's all messed up. But it was painfully clear that the interruption and mockery had crushed their excitement. After that, it got me thinking about how people often belittle what others find meaningful. Imagine dedicating your entire life to something, finding find genuine comfort and purpose in it, only to have someone casually dismiss it or even just straight up laughing in your face with, "That's fake." Even if they believe they were right, it's an incredibly inconsiderate way to approach deeply personal beliefs. Like, could you imagine you're eating your comfort meal and I just say, "You know that's bad for you, right?" Even if I believe in what I say, me saying that serves no other purpose than to feel superior. Just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean you have to tear it down for others. What's ironic about these "your religion isn't real" comments is that they quite literally wouldn't actually change anyone's mind. Nobody's faith, something that they've likely built around their worldview, is going to crumble because someone dropped a dismissive one-liner. It's just very obvious that comments like that aren't engaging in thoughtful debate. They're less about curiosity or understanding and more about delivering a smug, self-serving jab. If your goal is to make religion seem irrational, why use such an irrational approach yourself? A great example is how many Christians reject Halloween as demonic but go all out for Christmas, even though both holidays have pagan origins. Some non-believers think they're being clever when they point out if you don't let your kids celebrate Halloween, you shouldn't let them celebrate Christmas either. Be careful what you wish for, because there has been a growing number of Christian families who are now skipping Christmas as well because of its pagan roots. If the goal was to get the parents to lighten up and let their kids enjoy Halloween, this backfired wondrously. Instead of loosening up their rules, some families doubled down and canceled both holidays. Maybe you won the debate, but now kids get to miss out on the fun and community both celebrations offer. Telling a devout Christian family that Christmas is a stolen pagan holiday isn't exactly a persuasive argument. I've actually found that working with their framework ends much more positively. I recently said to a family that Halloween is a holiday that often celebrates the dead and by extension ghouls who rise from the dead. And you know who else famously rose from the dead? It might sound like a stretch because it is, but it's far more likely to resonate with someone rooted in their beliefs. If the goal is to let kids dress up and collect candy without turning it into a theological debate, you need to learn to pick your battles. Criticizing religious holidays to prove a point about hypocrisy very rarely works. It often alienates the very people they're trying to persuade, and ironically leaves kids with fewer options to celebrate. A little empathy and creativity go a long way in bridging cultural divides. The strategy of a gotcha moment seems less about being right and more about being smug, and you become the exact thing that you're criticizing. It's counterproductive to the supposed goal of fostering critical thinking or breaking down harmful ideologies. Instead of promoting understanding, these snide remarks create more division and hostility. Not everyone's beliefs need to align for them to be valid. If someone's religion gives them peace, community, and meaning, why go out of your way to tear that down? It's not just dogma, it can be their culture, identity, or sometimes even their survival mechanism. Faith often becomes an emotional anchor that keeps them afloat. In those moments, they're not looking for a logical explanation of the universe, they're looking for comfort, hope, and something to hold on to when the world feels overwhelming. Logic, no matter how well intended, doesn't solve emotional crisis. Telling someone who's emotionally raw that their faith is delusional is the equivalent of telling someone drowning to just swim. People's emotions don't often adhere to logic, and they shouldn't have to. Faith often provides a sense of stability and meaning that science or cold rationality simply can't replicate. Whether it's praying during grief or believing that there's a purpose behind suffering, faith can help people navigate emotions and defy reason. Mocking that emotional support as weakness doesn't make you seem enlightened. It just makes you sound callous and disconnected from human experience. Science and religion often get framed as polar opposites by both theists and atheists, but they're not. I often see people online dismiss religions outright by claiming that science inherently supports atheism. But this perspective just oversimplifies the relationship between science and belief that overlooks the complexity of both. Some of the most greatest minds in history, like Isaac Newton and George Lemaitre, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, excuse me, the physicist and the Catholic priest who proposed the Big Bang Theory, obviously held strong religious beliefs. Even in modern day, many scientists actually practice religions like Buddhism, which emphasizes understanding the universe and oneself. I don't know why these atheists conflate skepticism with intellectualism, dismissing religious scientists as anomalies rather than acknowledging that many don't see any conflict between their faith and their work. Religion and science answer different questions. Science explains how the universe works, while religion often seeks to answer why. But of course, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, it's just all a bunch of slightly different cults, right? Doesn't matter if they're following dramatically different philosophies or living peaceful lives, they're obviously all just brainwashed and sheep who can't think for themselves. Because you've cracked the code of the universe and clearly know better than the billions of people worldwide. I honestly hate how much atheists call anything remotely structured a cult. Yes, I know that there are many extremist groups that cause undeniable harm, and those do deserve scrutiny. I should know because I already did it. Can lead individuals
individuals to cult-like behavior.
But throwing the word cult as a blanket statement for theists who are peaceful or culturally significant practices just exposes your ignorance. It's like someone pointing at a book club and saying, "Cult, you're in a cult. You know that book wasn't actually written by a wizard, right?" Some people find real peace and purpose through their spirituality, and dismissing that as cultish just because it's structured just diminishes that. And lumping everything under the cult umbrella also dilutes the meaning of the word. The term is supposed to highlight dangerous, manipulative groups, but when it's used to describe anything you don't personally understand, it becomes meaningless. Are these practices influencing anyone negatively, or are you just annoyed that people have found a different sense of purpose that you don't get? This lazy labeling also has its own consequences. People who've been genuinely harmed by actual cults often struggle to have their experiences taken seriously because the term is thrown around so casually. They get met with people who believe they just went to church on Sundays. Meanwhile, those who rely on their faith for comfort or community get unfairly judged as brainwashed or naive. Targeting individual beliefs, especially ones that bring people joy or connection without affecting you negatively, is so unnecessary. Not every form of faith is hurting society. Sometimes people just want something to believe in, and if it gives them hope or makes their day a little bit brighter, why is that a problem? I know a common argument is that religion in general makes the world terrible, so people who enable religions are a part of the problem. I feel like that argument just oversimplifies religion as a whole. Obviously, you should be aware of historical context of religion before you dedicate your life to something that might be harmful, but pinning societal harm on religion alone is intellectually lazy. Like, people have been misusing belief systems to gain power and control since forever, sure, but that's a human issue, not really a flaw inherent to religion itself. Like when police use dogs to catch suspects. If the dogs are being misused or trained poorly, that's on the handlers, not the dogs. The tool or system isn't really the problem, it's the way humans choose to exploit it. Do you see what I mean? The fault lies with those in control, not the tool or belief they're manipulating. Take fascism and communism as examples. There are many people who believe that both can benefit society, yet both led to atrocities on an unimaginable scale. Millions of lives were lost, societies manipulated, and cultures destroyed because of ideologies weaponized by those in power. These systems banked on the assumption of collective goodwill, only to crumble when exploited by the powerful. People have misused religion in the same way, wielding it as justification for their greed and cruelty. The argument, "My God allows me to do this to you, so I must be in the right," has long been a tool for rationalizing oppression, whether through slavery, colonization, or war. But I promise you that the common denominator isn't religion. If your religion is real, why did your powerful figure not stop this or that from happening? Because belief systems are not mechanisms for micromanaging human behavior or natural events. There's a lot of religious people who also don't understand that. Religion often presents the idea of free will, emphasizing that humanity is responsible for its actions and the consequences of those actions. Blaming a higher power for every instance of harm assumes that the purpose of such a power is to intervene in human decisions or natural chaos constantly, which contradicts many theological teachings about free will, growth, and autonomy. I feel like this question sums up the misunderstanding of religion. Faith isn't always expecting divine intervention, but finding meaningful guidance and strength in the world that can be chaotic and unfair. Critiquing faith through this lens often oversimplifies the nuanced relationship between belief, morality, and human agency. It's less about a deity's failure to act and more about a human's choose to navigate the challenges and injustices of their world. If you strip away faith, the drive for power remains. People in power will always find some way to exploit the common folk. Nationalism, politics, and economics have all been weaponized in ways equally destructive. It's not really the belief systems that are inherently flawed, it's the people manipulating them. A hammer, for example, can build a shelter or smash a window. Hammers can be useful when the intent is to use them correctly. Therefore, blaming religion as the sole source of societal harm is like blaming a hammer for a broken pane of glass. By the way, before anyone twists this analogy, weapons of war are not tools, but let's stay on topic. Religion, despite its flaws, also serves as a framework for emotional and cultural resilience. It's inspired countless acts of charity, kindness, and community building. Sure, I'd love it if everyone did good things simply out of the goodness of their hearts, not for spiritual award, but to be real, most people don't operate that way. Faith motivates millions to be better versions of themselves, even if it's imperfectly applied. Humanity's capacity for harm doesn't hinge on religious beliefs or the lack of it. The idea that if we abolish religion, everything will be fine is naive. It overlooks the fact that humans, with or without faith, will always find ways to exploit power dynamics. True progress isn't about erasing belief systems, it's about addressing the deeper issues of control, greed, and dominance that transcend religion. No ideology, atheist or theist, will solve that without accountability at its core. I know many of you probably find this video incredibly hypocritical, since I've already spent around like 40 minutes talking about how I don't like religion. But even with this video, I stand by that statement. The main point of those videos is that I hate terrible people who use religion as an excuse to be terrible. I still despise organized religions because of how easily exploitive it is, but I genuinely don't see what's wrong with individuals practicing faith if they're doing it safely and respectfully. Like, being a skeptical person isn't a bad thing. Like, it allows you to question everything, but there's a difference between healthy skepticism and outright mockery. When atheists laugh at the idea of spiritual beliefs or mock those who find comfort in religion, they're not being skeptical, they're just bullying. It is possible to question something without outright ridiculing it, and I wish more people understood that. Ultimately, the mysteries of existence, why we're here, what happens after we die, are vast and incomprehensible. Whether you're atheist, agnostic, religious, or spiritual, we're all working with the same limited information. Religions and spirituality can be so interesting to learn about, but I hate that both theists and atheists alike who love to pretend that their one belief is the grand truth when it's purely based on a closed-minded thought. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters.